A listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. In this episode, I've travelled to the far north coast of New South Wales, but I'm in the stunning hinterland as opposed to beachside. They've had some heavy rain of late, and my rental car looks like it's done a stage of the World Rally Championship as I arrive, much to my guest's delight. He's having a good laugh about it. It's here that former MotoGP mechanic Alex Briggs has escaped after almost 30 years travelling with the World Motorcycle Championship. It's actually been his home for quite some time, so he's racked up some frequent flyers and also done some decent stints away from family while working in the pit lane. It was a tight-knit crew he was with, including some Aussies and Kiwis who worked with some of the greats, including Valentino Rossi and Mick Doohan. Alex was on the tools, playing a significant part in no less than 12 Premier Class world titles, 5 straight with Doohan and a magnificent 7 with Rossi. As you'll hear, Briggs still loves bikes and is working around them again, while hot-rodding golf clubs, of all things. No, I didn't read that wrong. He's learned a lot from Jeremy Burgess, who you can also find in the Rusty's Garage library. Both respectfully waited until they'd finished their MotoGP chapters before sharing their stories. Like Jeremy, you'll enjoy some of Alex's behind-the-scenes insights on life in the paddock and what makes champions tick. Now, I've kind of had the red carpet rolled out for me here. His wife, Ellen, a successful stand-up comedian, has made coffee and insisted that I use her podcast gear, which is already set up and good to go. All we have to do is grab a seat and let the conversation begin. We'll talk more about Ellen a little later, but we kick things off with early life for Alex in Canberra and what made him gravitate to bikes.
Pretty normal suburban house with my parents. Both, my father worked for the CSIRO, which was like a government science department, so I'm sure he used to just cry when he walked past my bedroom once we got into motorcycles. But there's funny stories with him as well. And my mum, she basically towards the end owned a shop that sold jokes and makeup and stuff like that for what's called the Funny Shop. Yeah, so very interesting. She's her background's German, although she never spoke German in the house, which now, as years have gone by, I wish I learnt something like that. But anyway, and how do I get into bikes and stuff like that? Basically, I used to be into sport. I used to play cricket in summer and hockey in winter, or soccer, and one of the kids had a mini bike when I was probably year 7.
Can you remember what kind of mini bike it was?
No, now I remember now exactly what happened. I got billeted to Deniliquin as a...
like a boarding?
Yeah, for hockey though. So we had like an inter-school thing with this school in Deniliquin. So we went, now it's all come back to me. So we went there and the kid was on a farm, like a really big farm, and he had a KX80. Kawasaki 80cc mini bike, and I'd never ridden a motorbike in my life. And the guy said, I'll show you how to ride. So there we were, we used to just rip up and down this guy's farm road, which was like a couple of kilometre road to the house. And that's it. I just was hooked from that minute on. I mean, the first time you ride a motorbike, no helmet, just in probably school uniform up and down this road, just like going, wow, you think you're doing a million miles an hour. And that was it. I was hooked. Came home and a friend of mine had a mini bike, a little tiny Honda. I don't know what the really little ones were called. Like a QR, but, tiny little mini bike.
Yep.
And this is how bad it was. I used to carry his bag home if he let me ride around the backyard on this bike, So, because I was just hooked then. So then that was it. Then I saved up some money, bought a KX80.
How did you do that? Did you have like a paper run, or you sold toys or something? What'd you do?
I just washed cars, my mum and dad's cars, and they overpaid me. And then I also later on I mowed lawns for money to go racing because I remember I lost the $10 entry fee, and my mum said, "I'm not giving you any more." And I said, "Shit, I've got a race tomorrow." So I just grabbed the mower and just walked down the street and just went into every house with a lawnmower and my can of fuel and said, "I'll mow your lawn. I'll mow your lawn for $10 to $10, you know." And eventually I found somebody, and I mowed his lawn for like, I don't know, years. I mowed this guy's lawn.
Fantastic.
So that was another bike-related story.
The racing took place where? Fairbairn Park and places like that in Canberra?
So in the Canberra, there was pretty good, when I was growing up, there was a pretty good short-circuit track.
Yep.
And then just near the short-circuit track was a motocross track called the Kamagutsa. Okay. That's what everyone called it, because that's exactly what would happen. It was a rocky, harsh place, man. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we do short circuit. There was a junior short circuit track and then a senior short circuit track, which was quite a good track in the day. So in the mornings you would do short circuit, and in the afternoon you would either, if you had the money, you would change wheels and then race motocross in the afternoon.
Awesome.
I did it for a little while, and then I just said to my dad, "I don't like short circuit. I like motocross."
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting how I ended up in road racing and didn't like short circuit, which is kind of almost like a derivative. But anyway, motocross was my thing, and I just thought, this is it. I'm going to be world champion. And that's how it started. But I was kind of a late starter. I think it was probably 16 or 15 when I started. So all the good guys are already champions by then. But
who were the influences? Was it Craig Dack, who you would end up working for? Was it Jeff Leask? Who were the guys that inspired you then?
At that time, it was all about America. So I just would wait for them. The magazine called Motocross Action.
Yeah.
I used to have surfing magazines. I do that a little bit too. But living in Canberra was a 2-hour drive. But the posters soon got replaced. I had them on my roof and everywhere I was surfing and stuff. They soon got replaced just with motocross riders from America, pretty much.
Like who?
Oh, there'd be the Ricky Johnson, Johnny O'Mara, David Bailey. Like those people were just like for me were gods. I just was exactly like how kids probably would look to Valentino Rossi. or they did. So it was like that. So I just had them everywhere, and I just couldn't wait for this magazine to come in. Like a month late.
Yeah,
it was great.
Did you lose any bark along the way? And what was the relationship with Dad like? Is he on the tools and helping you? Are you listening to him? Are you trying to do it your way? What was that all like?
Basically, we learnt. I mean, I got into mechanics because of the bikes, and I got into all of that, and so did he. Like he's a really smart guy, still is, but in a different way, like in a scientific kind of way. So there we would have this KX80 in the laundry. We didn't have a shed. We didn't have a garage. We had it in the laundry of the house. My mum just fucking hated that. But she'd put up with it. So there it was, just sitting in the middle of the laundry. And we had to change piston rings one time, So my dad's reading the manual and I'm reading the manual. And it was like a 2-day job, like to get this air-cooled motorcycle apart, and off we did. And we felt so proud, like that was the first big job we'd ever done on a motorcycle. And by then I was sort of hooked, and I decided that I wanted to be a mechanic for trade, but it basically started from the motorbike. I didn't really think at that time, I guess, I wanted to be a world champion or anything. But I kind of had that inkling that I liked riding motorcycles. So I ended up getting a trade as a mechanic in Canberra.
On buses, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Government buses?
Government bus service. So I went to my careers advisor like you do in school, and the guy just went, you're a loser, basically, right? So I hate those sort of, anyway. So...
Isn't that funny how that ironically motivates you? You're so wound up about, what the hell would you know? And look where you've gone.
Yeah, well, I see it with kids today. I talk to other kids and stuff, and people, I've done talks about my job and, for schools and a few other things. And it's always interesting talking to those people, the careers advisors, they just sort of miss the boat with these kids, they just haven't found the thing that they like, so they don't do particularly well in the things that they don't like, and so the teacher assumes that they're an idiot or something. But anyway, so this career advisor basically looked at me and just looked at my grades and stuff and said, "Mate, this is when year 11. So in Canberra, you did year 10, and then you went to did year 11 and 12 at a college, they'd call it, like as preparation for university, sort of.
Like a TAFE or a...
No, it wasn't a TAFE. It's just like just the last year before you would go to uni.
Okay.
But some schools in other states go all the way to year 12 and then off you go. But in Canberra, you did year 11 and 12. It's kind of, their opinion was you sort of were a little bit more on your own, so you're getting you used to being ready for university, I guess. So anyway, so I was in year 11. I was doing I'd get me a very low entrance score into university, I guess. And the careers advisor said, I think you should start applying for jobs now because you're going to have to get used to getting knocked back, Basically, he was just saying you're not going to get anywhere. So anyway, I went and did work experience at this government bus company, and I just loved it. Like, you couldn't believe the guys were great. And I don't know, the motorcycle thing started me on the mechanics, and then I just loved it. It was great. Anyway, then the government apprenticeships turned around and said, okay, we're having an intake of apprentices. So I applied.
Yeah.
And there was like hundreds of people, like big intake of people, and lots of people applying. And, I was all nervous, I turned up there and I was sitting like a desk kind of like this, but there was engine parts on it, parts I had never seen before, and then there was a panel of 4 or 5 guys. I was just like, no, and I'm there in like a pencil-thin tie, leather tie in the 80s.
I know those ties. Yeah.
So, and then like
Miami Vice.
Yeah, it was that style, and I was in like a little cheap suit that my mum had bought me, just all wrong, But anyway, and these guys asked me questions about the mechanical parts, but also about life and TV and politics and real weird stuff, which I understand now. They were just seeing if you're sort of grounded, I guess, and
worldly and blah,
a little
blah.
bit, just to see what you would say, So, and I think I nailed most of the parts. And I remember they had a turbo on there and a few other little things. And they asked me about who was the Prime Minister at the time, a few other things, and I did okay. Didn't hear anything back from him for ages. So then I rang up maybe 3 weeks later and said, I applied for this apprenticeship. How did I go? Or what's happening? And the lady said, hang on, what's your name? Blah, 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 Briggs. And I said, oh, yeah. Actually, yeah, you're starting next such and such. You're a second on the list. And I've gone, shit, here I've got this job. So I quit school and started as an apprentice bus mechanic, and I did that. That was great.
So what's the first set of wheels? Was it, motocrossers often liked high ace vans and things. What did you have?
Well, the high ace came a little later. The first car, and still probably one of my biggest mistakes in my life, was not the car, but what I did to it, Like,
what'd you do? What was it?
Well, I had an XY Falcon Ute. Like, now they're going for silly money, right? So I bought $2,000 I think it cost.
Yeah.
Maybe less. I can't even remember.
What state was it in? What colour? What? Tell us.
It was a white one. I bought it in Queanbeyan, which is
not far from Canberra. Yeah.
Just across the road from Mark Webber's dad's shop.
Servo, whatever it was. The shop. Sorry, yes.
Oh yeah, we had like a servo shop. I forget exactly. But it was a motorbike shop, Yamaha shop. At the time, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So it was just across the road from there. I forget what it was called, but anyway. So car dealer, and I bought this car. My dad's come and looked at it, and spent all my money from my first year apprentice wage, or something like that. I can't exactly remember, but yeah. But then I butchered it,
Did you?
Well, the car was okay for quite a while. But it started using more oil than petrol, and so then I came across an engine from an XF Falcon Ute, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, you can buy this." So I bought this engine from a car. I don't know how many years later the car version is, like 15 years later or whatever. Anyway, the engine fits like straight in, right? The exhaust pipe bolts up and everything. Like, they didn't change anything except for the throttle cable was it was a cable, not levers.
Okay.
Did that, and then I remember trying to register it, and the guy said, you can't because it's got too much power. And I said, it's the same capacity. It was a 4.1 or something. It's the same capacity, and the guy had an argument with me, and I said, read the rules, so we checked the rules.
You said read the rules.
Because I'd read them. I'd read them, and you're allowed as long as the engine capacity hasn't changed. He wanted me to put disc brakes on the front of this car.
Yeah.
I didn't have the money for that. So anyway, passed it, and off it went. I had that for years. Then the high ace vans came, and then it was just a constant stream of high ace vans.
So tell me the story then, because from memory, you're earning about $35,000 as a government bus mechanic. That's pretty good money for a young bloke back then.
Well, by the time I'd finished, I got my trade, and it was, I think, about 30 grand. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
So you then get an opportunity to go and work for a motocross team that involved Craig Dack and others. I think it was Sydney-based. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you, for significantly less pay, decide to up and leave, move to Sydney, sleep on the floor.
Yeah, pretty much.
Tell us that story.
Well, so up until that point, I've been racing bikes and thinking I was going to be world champion, and I've travelled all around Australia with all my mates. And
what was the reality that maybe you wouldn't be world champion? Or you
turned out I was better at fixing them than riding them. So, yeah. But some of my mates were really good riders, and so we'd drive in these high-ace vans all crisscrossing the country. And I'd work on their bikes in car parks at hotels. We'd put the bikes in hotels and stuff and be at the car park and stuff like that. And anyway, I kind of got a little bit of a name for fixing these guys' bikes, I guess. Sometimes people would say, who's working on your bike? I started porting engines and doing suspension and all sorts of stuff for these guys that were quite good, and they were winning, There was a guy called Stan Bergen. He was a 125 rider. He did really well, and I was kind of good mates with him. There was a whole group of guys from Sydney, we used to travel. Anyway, and then I ended up with a broken tailbone from practicing somewhere. A Bargo, I think I was practicing with some friends.
Had an awkward jump landing?
I can't remember, just probably cartwheel the thing end for end, who knows, trying to be better than I was. So anyway, I'm driving home, thinking about my life. I've got two bikes. I've got a race bike and a practice bike. I was pretty serious at that stage. Get a phone call a few weeks later from a guy called Ross McWaters, and he said, would you like to be a mechanic for Yamaha Australia with the motocross team, in Wetherill Park? Peter Jackson Yamaha, and my rider would be Stephen Andrew, I think it was. So
Dacker was in the team though, wasn't he? I think, was he the other rider at that stage? I'm trying to remember.
No, he came back, I think, the following year I think he was in the UK, I think. It finished, it's hard to remember all back then. But anyway, Ben Parise, I think, was the other rider. Was it Ben Parise? Shit. No, maybe not.
Anyway, you knew your rider.
Anyway. So I went, all right, look, I'm going to pack it in here and I'm going to go and do that. So went to 20 grand before tax, stayed at Ross's house, on the floor at Ross's house in the spare room.
Roll-out futon and all sorts of
Exactly, yeah, that's right. It was the cheapest thing I could buy. High-ace van, sold my bikes, bought a futon and rolled that out. I slept on that for ages. I can't even remember what happened after that. But anyway, so I stayed at Ross's house, basically. Ross ended up moving to another apartment, and I moved with him there and slept, had a bedroom with him.
Yeah, and rented a room and off you went.
Closer to Wetherill Park for a while, yeah.
So did you, So that's what happened, yeah.
You
competed in it and, clearly loved it. Now you've sort of transitioned to the mechanical side with a good team. What were there learnings and all of that? Did you love it even more? Did you sort of think, this is a bit of me, I want to continue? In my sense, I was a terrible go-karter, right? I did some fun stuff with the old man, and commentary and things morphed out of an opportunity that I went, this is a great way to stay involved with the game that you love and learn more about the people and just offer something different but be connected to the sport. So obviously that must have been a similar realisation for you in some way, was it?
I just loved motocross, and I loved racing, and I loved everything about it. And I don't know, it was definitely not worked for me. Like, I enjoyed it. We did lots of, I guess you would call it overtime, but we were just mucking around in the shed, really.
Till sort of late at night.
Sometimes, but just playing, like doing stupid stuff and polishing things and learning all the whole time, learning what not to do, what to do.
Any late night test runs?
Sometimes we'd get them out and ride around the back of the car park at Wetherill Park, and there was this like a forklift ramp that they'd back up to trucks, and you could drive up a forklift and then load stuff into the back of a pallet truck. So it was like a back of a truck height, and that made a perfect jump. So we used to do that, but you'd just destroy the tyres in a heartbeat. So I remember
get in trouble over that, did you?
Yeah, but Ross would have a go too sometimes. But and
so how many years did you do that for? Were you with them for?
I think it was probably. It wasn't really a long time. It was maybe just under 3 years. I was like, I think 92, 93. No, 91, 92. Mate, something like that. Only a couple of years, really, really quite a short time. But I'd met a lot of people in that time, because I still had this dream of actually the dream of kind of evolved. I wanted to know more, do more. And then I decided I wanted to go to Europe.
Yep.
So I decided I wanted to go to Europe as a motocross mechanic.
And motocross opened the doors for you to do that. Initially, the path was going to be, instead of circuit racing, was actually going to be via motocross, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You had a deal. You did a handshake deal with the team, I think, didn't you?
Yeah. So I just met all these people. I even went to Japan. I'd been to Japan in that time because there was the Wind Safari, it was called.
Oh, yes.
Maybe it was a different sponsor at that time, PIAA maybe or something. Anyway, there was basically effectively the Wind Safari, and they had asked for a mechanic and said, we've got 2 factory Japanese riders, and we have an Aussie guy, I forget the guy's name, and he's going to kind of show the Japanese guys how it gets all done. And so they invited me to do that, and there was no money, and I said, yeah, I'm doing that, I'll do that. So I did that. It was great, like you just... Then from there we went, they invited me to go to Japan. So I went, well, no money. I had to pay my own way. They said, you can come to the factory. So off I went to the factory in Japan. I spent Christmas there, 90, must have been Christmas 90. No, because 93 is when I went to Europe. So it might have been 90. Maybe I've got the years a little bit, and maybe it's 90, 91, something like that. But
okay.
Anyway, so around 92, Christmas I spent in Japan for Yamaha Japan, like the factory that I ended up going back to years later, like what a unbelievable story, really. But anyway, so this factory, couldn't believe my eyes, just everything about Japan. There's so many stories about that, and just the first time in Japan, and I'd never been there.
Did you go okay with language barriers and things like that?
Oh, mate, it was just unreal, I was just, and it was a time when you go to Japan back then. It was nothing was in English. Like maybe the very central Tokyo stations had English. Everything else didn't, So it was interesting. And I remember walking around Iwata, which is where the factory Yamaha is, just walking around on the weekend one day, and these girls had locked their keys in the car. Like these two girls. I went up to them and said, hey, how's it going? Kind of thing, like probably as Aussie as possible, or as you could imagine. And they've just gone, they're freaked out, like I've gone.
Thought you were an axe murderer.
I don't know what they were thinking, but anyway, they were just laughing and giggling, and I drew a picture of a coat hanger in the dirt. I said, can you go and get me one of them, sort of thing. Like, I can't speak any Japanese. And anyway, they come back with a coat hanger. I unwind the coat hanger and bend it up and shove it in the window sill and unlock their car. And they freaked out. It was like a magic trick, Yeah. So they've just gone, no way, in Japanese. Thank you, a lot of bow and a lot of stuff. And then they drove off. And about half an hour later, they just pulled up alongside of me. I'm still just walking around the town. They pull up alongside of me and get out of the car and give me a full-size bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Because they've just gone, what are we going to give this Westerner guy? So
as a thank you.
Yeah, give me this chicken. So, that was a good memory.
So how did the handshake deal to go to Europe come
really
about? That's all good.
So I was I'd spoken to lots of people, about just going to Europe. I wanted to go to Europe. And Gary Ben was running the motocross racing team in Europe for Yamaha. And he was in Australia for the motocross designations, and I was down there and we spoke. I think it was there where we spoke. And anyway, we shook hands on a deal. And he said, yeah, you can come next year and you can work for a guy called Marnik Beverts, who was racing, but he ended up not getting the contract for the following year. But anyway, regardless of that, so then driving from, I'd agreed, yep, I'm off to Europe, So then I drive the truck from there in the
What part of Europe? Where
we're in the motocross destinations in Manchima.
Okay.
So
WA.
WA, right? So then I drive the truck, the team race truck. Man, it's all coming back to me now. So I drive this truck ride all the way back up to Brisbane, because there's a supercross in Brisbane.
Good road trip.
Man, we didn't have that much time. It was just me. I don't know if that was the trip that we drove. It might have been the trip we drove. Driving there, Daka was in the truck, right? Driving
Craig
there.
Dak.
Yeah. So I think he's in the truck. and it wouldn't even pull top gear across the Australian Bight because the wind was that strong, right? So he just wanted to see. I'm pretty sure this was that trip. And he gets in and goes, fuck it, I'm flying back. so I had to drive this truck back alone. I mean, he didn't drive anyway because he didn't have the truck license, but he goes, I'm not flying, I'm flying back.
Done.
I think it was this trip. Anyway, anyway, that did happen on maybe one of those trips. So driving back, and I'm just going, like, eyes are hanging out of my head, I remember hitting some roos and the headlights. I just saw them spiraling off on the wires until they just blew off. And I couldn't drive any further, so I remember having to wait at Port Augusta, I think, and at Repco to get some new headlights. Anyway, get to Brisbane, and Ross goes, oh, you've got a phone call from a bloke called Jeremy Burgess. You've got to ring him back. This is his number. And I go, who's he? So I ring this bloke, Jeremy Burgess, and turns out that they're expanding the team in Europe for road racing, and they're going to they needed another mechanic, and my name was mentioned because I knew a guy called Peter Laskowski, nicknamed Buddha, and he was Jeff Leask's mechanic, and I'd met him a few times through motocross, saying I want to go to Europe, I want to be a motocross mechanic, and so he sort of helped me out a little bit on that, and I had seen him at Eastern Creek. For some reason, I went out to watch the road racing in Eastern Creek. I got some tickets through Mick Doohan's manager at the time.
Yep.
But I didn't really know all these people. Anyway, so it all just sort of all happened, And so Jerry Burgess rings me, or I ring him and just go, hey, I've got a message to ring you. He explains that we're expanding the team. Would you like to work? And I go, shit. He goes, well, it's going to be 50,000. Oh, I think it was 60,000 US dollars, which was like nearly 100 grand, like back then with the exchange rate. And I've gone from 20. So he's gone, this. And I said, man, I've got the job just like that. And he goes, oh, I can sack you anytime I want, right? So that's
JB.
Yeah, that's him.
JB.
Right? So I didn't know this guy, right? I mean, clearly I know him now.
Yeah.
So yeah, shit, okay. I don't know what to do. I said, look, I've got to ring a bloke first. I don't know, And
So because of your loyalty, you'd shaken hands.
Yeah, so I was going to go to Europe on the motocross deal, right? Either way I'm going, right?
Yep.
So that's what's happened. But I didn't really know much about road racing, didn't know much about any of that stuff. So I ring Gary Benner. I say, Gary, I've had this offer, but it's good money and yada, yada. And he's gone, mate, I think you should go road racing because it's a lot cleaner. That's what Gary said to me. Honestly, he just went, just do that, I think he might have said, we'll still be here if you don't want to do it or whatever, but just go road racing. So if it wasn't for Gary, I wouldn't have accepted JB's offer, I guess. So then I rang JB back and he said, yep, okay, you got the job.
That conversation, from what I can gather, between the, finalising the negotiation, him offering the job and we're all go, was like 30 seconds or a minute. It was just like bang, 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 we're all done here. And you were like, what? I've got the job.
Pretty much, yeah. And JB in his way just like, don't worry, I can sack you anytime I want it. So then I remember he said, what I need to do now, he said, you need to buy a fax machine because Honda Japan will send you faxes.
Yeah.
And you need to be at Phillip Island on this day.
For pre-season testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Amazing.
And that's what happened.
So to join the dots, Jeremy, as you know, has been on the podcast and worked significantly with you for the bulk of your work life with Mick Doohan, with Valentino Rossi, etc. But your initial pathway here in the expansion of the team that he was working on was to actually work with our good mate Darryl Beattie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So just explain the role that you were going to do there and your first impressions of Daz when you got to meet him.
Oh, mate, it was just terrific. I was just so wide-eyed, it was great. Turn up at Phillip Island, never been there before in my life, and meet all the guys, and it was unreal. Daz, and then Daz and I were both going to Europe really for the first time, so it was kind of cool.
What was he like back then? I mean, we're mates, and he hates the whole notion of look in the rearview mirror, how good you were, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. And if we turn the pages on his career, he ticked some mega boxes, but not a world championship. And I often feel for him in that regard because he clearly had immense talent, mate, didn't he?
Oh, he was good enough, and like everything in life, sometimes you just need a few things to fall your way. But he was a good enough rider to be there. I mean, most of them are, you know, once they get that level, if things go the right way for them. But he was good enough. I mean, I think if you're good enough to win a race, then you just need to win more races and you win a championship. So, like, I mean, anyway, it was just terrific. And his dad came over there, and oh man, it was just such a good fun. And I was so green, you know, too. I remember turning up to the first time I went away. I had a jet pilot gear bag, like for jet skiers. And it was massive motocross bag. Yeah. I had that. I had a camera bag, like with a video camera and a still camera, because I'm going on this world tour of Europe, you know? Like, I don't know.
Got to capture all this.
What a dickhead I was. Anyway, so I turn up and like JB and all those guys just laughing at me, right? Yeah. So off we go to Europe with these massive bags, huge. I mean, I think we did Japan first and a few other things, but I just remember now, I mean, not now, but the last sort of 20 years, it was just a wheelie bag. That was it. Yeah. 5 jocks, 5 socks, pair of jeans you're wearing, pair of jeans in, 2 shorts, 1 sweater. That's it. You know?
We'll illustrate more of the story, because your life has been a suitcase for a long time. Just rattle off the stats for the people that are listening. Was it 28 years? How long have you done this for?
Yeah,
since then?
This is like I was saying to you. I'm probably going to forget all the exact details, but it was 28 seasons. So from 93. But I started the very last. In 92 was probably I did the first test at Phillip Island. Okay. But basically 93 was the first season with Dazza.
And the intriguing thing for me in this, and it's the way of the world in motorsport in many respects, there are a couple of times where you've had a multi-year deal, a 2-year deal, but by and large, it was year to year, wasn't it?
So it was always just year to year, racing. I only had 2 2-year deals. Once was with Ducati, sort of midway through the whole experience, and then the last deal I was on was a 2-year deal.
Amazing.
Generally, it's a 1-year deal because I think, you know, you're racing, you just don't know what's going to happen. Sponsors, money, you know, riders, who knows, you know.
A lot's evolved in that time frame in the sport. When you walk into a garage now, I mean, it's beautiful. Carpet, the way that the garages are set up and decorated more or less with the paneling and the walls and the screens, and I mean, it's super professional. What was it like back then?
It wasn't like that. But I mean, it was as. But because you didn't know any different or things weren't different, it was still the top of the top. You know, it was as good as it gets.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked it. Then when I look back, the focus was really on the motorcycle. The focus was on the motorcycle and how you're going to win that race.
Yep.
And I think they've lost that to some degree. You know, some people argue either way.
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, the show is in a lot of people's eyes almost seems to be more important than the actual winning a motorcycle race, in my opinion. To a lot of people, you know, managers and some of the bigger people, it seems to be the image and the show seems to be where they spend a lot of their focus, a lot of, I think, wasted energy and a lot of times. Nice. But I've just recently gone to a couple of I've been to a first Australian race and it's back to basics there, which kind of reminds me a bit of the first time.
We'll get to that in the discussion. I'm glad that you're still on the tools and the Australian scene is benefiting from your involvement, and Brent's, because Brent is there too, your partner in crime.
Well, it remains to be seen if it's benefiting, but anyway.
What happens when a mechanic, a comedian and a journalist meet at a house in the hinterland? We get a podcast. That was my version of a joke. Did it work?
Daz tells a good story about, I don't know which team it was, whether it was Honda or Suzuki or who he was working or riding for at the time, but just working with the Japanese engineers and that crossover. And one year they were at Phillip Island, and crazily, Phillip Island had 2 back-to-back days that were nigh on identical in weather and conditions, perfect, right? So he goes out this particular day 1, and, kind of in his eyes, it's mega. It sets the world on fire. Bike's great. Comes back day 2, and identical conditions. The Japanese have told him they want to test a few things or whatever, but he cannot get within a second of the time the day before, and it is doing his head in. His head scratching. He said, I just about hurled myself over the bars on a few occasions, and he didn't quite get a clear answer on the day as to why. Was it tyre related? Was it what had changed in the bike? And it wasn't until like 4 months later, and he ran into one of the engineers again, and he said, what the hell happened there? And the Japanese engineer sort of, said to him, Biti-san, different chassis. They tried a completely different chassis on him, but they wanted his, I guess, authentic feedback. They didn't want to let him know that they changed something wholesale. I think they figured if he just applies himself the same way he did the day before, we'll be able to really gauge whether this is And he was like, he wanted to pull his hair out when he heard that story, So, but where I'm going with my question here is that now you're playing with one of the biggest teams in world sport or in motorsport. You're as a group, you integrate with the Japanese and what is being developed and built at the factory, aren't you?
When I first started, definitely at Honda and early years at Yamaha, I guess it was a collaboration between everyone. That's one of the things that's changed a lot too. But definitely when I first started Honda, and really when I first started at Yamaha, it was very much the whole group was involved. The mechanics and the engineers was very much involved. It did definitely changed over time, but at that time it was really we're all involved. And I don't think that doesn't sound like our story, because generally we would. Also, as mechanics, we would have told the rider how we changed the chassis, and the stopwatch.
Maybe it wasn't Honda. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which brand?
But anyway, I feel bad for him.
No, I
can understand sometimes. You do not want to tell your rider everything, because then they start thinking about that thing while they're riding. But a chassis, man.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the stopwatch tells you the answer. You just go. The riders are going to try to go as fast as they can, no matter what. Right. So, okay, we changed this chassis because we want to see if we can go faster. I mean, that's the whole game, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so
93 is Daz season 1. Am I right in recounting that?
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure what transpires here, but you end up on the garage with JB and Mick for 94, don't you?
Yeah.
And the path of success begins.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. Daryl, I think had been asked by Honda to race superbikes. Maybe they wanted him to do that, and he said, "No, I want to stay in GB."
Yep.
And then I don't know, that was
the ill-fated year he went to Yamaha, wasn't it?
So he wanted to keep racing, and Honda really, I think they really liked him and wanted him to do well because they had a new superbike, and for them that was important, but it wasn't important for Daryl. So, man, it was a great time though. And then so at Christmas time, I'm up on the Gold Coast with Mick on, it was just like Miami Vice up there. So on a speedboat, Mick's speedboat, he had this speedboat.
It was
I don't know, man. It was mental, that thing. Anyway, so we're on this speedboat. I think it was there. It was one of the two boats at the time. Anyway, he just says, I'd like you to come and work on our side of the garage kind of for next year. And I said, yeah, okay. That'd be cool. So that was it. So that was 94, and Mick won the championship that year. So I put it down to me.
You put it down, yeah.
So it was great. Can you imagine? I was a young guy, and it was just second year. It was just great.
Surreal, mate. So you're part of
bizarre.
A world championship winning scenario.
Yeah, but I don't know.
I've never known you to get off on that, by the way. You've never, the whole time I've known you, walked around and gone, X world titles or chest out. Well, you just quietly toil away, and it's...
Yeah, well, it's not my world championship,
But you played a part in that, though.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to help the rider, That's the whole object is trying to help your rider do well, So that's the whole... That's it, really.
You get to see both sides of the athlete too. So in that moment you recounted a minute ago about the skater, the boat.
Yeah.
Man, that thing, when you were pinned in that thing, your face would flap in the breeze. It was so fast. That was such a cool thing. We're digressing here.
This is no way going to be even close to long enough, this chat.
No, I can tell already. the thing is, you get to see him in that casual conversation moment and to see the human being. Sometimes I would rock up for an interview and I would be super nervous, mate, because he was such an intense cat and so driven. I think you've reflected elsewhere that he just wanted to be first. He wanted to be first at the ticket counter at the airport to fly home. Yeah. He just had such a competitive streak in him. But you got to see both sides of that, didn't you, of the human?
Yeah, it's interesting also seeing him now, because he was very, at that time, like you said, he was just intense.
Time has helped him sort of chill more, hasn't it?
And he just wanted to win it. But I think part of the thing that helped me is because I wasn't a massive fan of road racing, or, maybe it would have been different if I suddenly was working for Ricky Johnson because I'd had those pictures on I don't know, but I never idolised any of the people I've worked for or anything like that. I've just been like, I'm working for you, you're working for me. I don't know, it just never seemed like that. And with Mick was good because he was, the second rider I worked for in road racing, but he was intense, like massively wanted to win everything, like I said, but he once asked me, he said, what's Valentino like when I work for Valentino? And I said, mate, after you, he's a dream. And Mick typically like, what do you mean? What the fuck's that mean? I go, well, what do you mean, what's it mean? You were just like a nightmare, But I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea. And he wasn't a nightmare. When I say that, I've got to say it in a way
that's in perspective. He wasn't
a nightmare. He was someone so driven that he just wanted to win. And
you have to have that as an athlete at that level.
But they show it in different ways. Darryl wanted to win. Every rider I've worked for wants to win like crazy, but Mick, he couldn't hide that he wanted to win, and he did it with everything. It was like he was training for racing.
Like a boxer,
everything he did. Although he was always shit at qualifying, so you go, man, how, he'd qualify sometimes good, but other times you'd just go try that harder, and we'd end up in like 8th. He'd have to come through the whole field, but that was no problem for him either. But he always just like I said, first to the airport, first in the queue, first, he loved being first.
500 cc's, 2 strokes. It's 4-stroke now, which we'll talk about later. But, everyone talks about what a golden era that was. The riders that were around, the machines. What was that like?
I loved it. It was just an extension of the motocross engines. They're just 4 125cc motocross engines bolted together. Yeah. That was it. That was great. I loved it. And my favourite thing was working on the cylinders and pistons and that sort of stuff. We didn't really do the fine tuning that you might think you did. It was basically maintenance, or Japan had figured out a new spec and then you might grind something to what they had said. We weren't there like just guessing and making changes with porting and stuff. But I loved all that. Cleaning pistons and exhaust pipes, and I still love it. I still love that.
That group of people would become family, and the tight nature of it was a constant through your career, and very clever that people like Mick and Valentino, kept that group by and large together over a long period of time. There were some changes, but in essence, were there moments where, because you're playing at the top of the game and each other so closely like that intuitive stuff must help, because you can understand, you can read situations. Yeah. But does it also get tested? Were there moments where you were, it got a bit tense, but you had to let it go? And can you remember moments like that, or was it pretty good by and large?
In my career, there's been a few like that, but mostly not, because mostly the guys that spend their time in racing for that long, one of your attributes is that you generally get on with people, or you're able to get around a problem like those sorts of social problems without being a drama. They're the people that have been in the paddock a long time. Generally, can again get on with people. So lots of people say, "Oh, you must be a great mechanic, and you must be this," and I go, "Well, I think I'm average. I'm this and this, but as a whole package, I'm decent because." Because I get on, I don't mind the travel, there's lots of things like that you have to be if you're going to be in this game for a long time. And some people come and go, and the reason they go is generally because they don't get on with other people.
Yeah.
Or just the lifestyle of of travelling and getting tired, and then it's, it puts a bit of stress and the stress of racing sometimes. But yeah, we were always really good. We never really had any majors.
So if I've got my homework right here, Brno, 1994, there's a party afterwards to celebrate some stuff, and you end up going to some club, and I think the club's got bouncers with machine guns or something out the front.
That's true, all true.
and in you go, and there might have been some colourful dances there, and at some point the quiet bloke opposite me on the microphone decides, I'm going to get up and have a crack at this pole dancing or mucking around or whatever you were doing.
Yeah.
And the bouncers came out of nowhere, and then I think Daz and
he told you the story.
And they stepped in and more or less tackled the bouncer or something, didn't they? What transpired there?
You pretty much nailed it. That's exactly what happened. So we win the championship. We're up at the track. We're all drinking up there, like out of, I don't know what we're doing.
I can't picture you doing this.
No, and it's not really me, right? Okay. So this is probably this is causing some of the problems. So anyway, we started drinking after the race, in what was this little truck we used to call Roger's truck.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we I don't know, we probably have dinner, and then somebody decides we're all going out to this discotheque at the hotel. It was called the Hotel Bobby, which was like, I don't know, it was just a hotel, discotheque, and
this
casino.
Is Czech Republic, by the way, for people who don't know.
Czech Republic, so they're a bit loose with some of the things, right? So anyway, we're there, and there's this big discotheque, and for some reason they wouldn't let us in, right? Because there's a whole heap of people turn up, like not just our team, like lots of the paddock have turned up to go into this discotheque, and it's got these big double glass doors, like as if like you open one, go in, then they lock them, you pay your money, then they open the next one, and off you go into this massive big hall or discotheque thing, right? Yeah. So there's guys with machine guns there, and just I don't know why I guess they must have trouble. I have no idea where the guns come from, right? So anyway, they're there, and we're all trying to get in and slurring and blah blah. And then anyway, some girls from the press girls, I think at the time, maybe from Marlboro team, I think.
Yeah,
Yamaha girls. Anyway, so they've negotiated with these guys, and and got us in, right? So off we go. We all go in there and having a good time drinking. Daz is in there, and Mick and everyone. We're all in there, and there's these big cages, kind of like tubular cages with girls dancing in them. Like different levels dancing on these sort of. Like, I can't remember if they got lowered in there or they just climbed up and then they sort of did this dance in there. They're not naked, but you know what I mean. It's provocative sort of stuff, and everyone's music's pumping, boom, boom, boom. And anyway, I must have had enough terps in me to do something stupid. So I decide I'm climbing up one of these things, right? But the girls took it in shifts, so there was nobody in the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I scale this thing, open the cage door, and I'm trying to get in there, and then this bouncer just rips me from like the back of the shirt just onto the ground, and then. He's carrying me out, like I'm off and going, And so Roger and Daz have seen this, come out of nowhere like just bull terriers and just tackle this bouncer.
Yeah.
I don't know, because they're full of terps too, So to tackle this bouncer, we all rolling around and then I just run, Like I didn't look back for them, run. And so they must have done the same thing. Anyway, that was it. We survived and we carried on.
I love it.
I don't know what happened, but I do remember that, and that was a bit bizarre.
What a patch, mate. I mean, that's the beginning of a run of 5 straight for Michael Sidney Doohan.
Yeah.
You guys are a part of all of that. Is there one that is, I mean, maybe the first one that you experienced is the one, is there, in that block of 5, is there one that was tense, hard fought, and perhaps you savour it for that reason? What is there? Is there
it's
one?
Hard. I can't really remember individual races as well back then, but I don't really. They're all kind of. He could win if we just did our work,
Yeah.
So like, the pressure was just don't cock up because he'll win if we can give him a bike. So my worry every race was just, have we given him a bike? Like there's something going to go wrong. So there was stress from that, but I never ever worried that he wasn't going to win. He was clearly the best rider, and he wanted to win. Well, there was problems we had here and there, and we had engine problems somewhere. I remember we drop the kilometres to like 400 k's when we had piston problems. And there's always these little things that people never hear about, like things break and a Honda.
So you limited the running to save it, to look after it, basically.
Oh, well, you just start changing the parts like way under mileage, like new piston and rear end bearings, So you... When there'd be a problem, the mileage would drop. So you might go from 1,000 k's to 400 k's, and then you'd just be changing those bits. So Honda would go, righto, that's it. And for Honda, an engine is everything for a Honda. For Hondas, there's the engine. If they have an engine failure with anything, for them it's just like that's the worst thing ever, The Japanese, you can just see they all just want it. So engines were a big thing for Honda. So if you had a problem, mileage would drop, and that meant we'd be working a lot just changing parts to keep them alive. Anyway, so... I remember that sort of thing, and I remember a few different races and bad weather and racing Daz.
Yep.
Daz was...
on the Suzuki at this stage?
Yeah, so I remember those sorts of things because Mick was really good at, and most of the riders do this, whether they say it or they don't. They basically, anyone that's competitive against them, they build up a hate for them somehow. It's just like an easier to race them if they don't like them. They all do it. So they go, if he's my competitor, Max Biaggi, or for both Valentino and Mick, they just go, right, I hate him, So, and Mick came up against Daz, which is his mate. And I think there was always a slight struggle for Mick because he couldn't do the old I hate you, because he was his mate. So I think there was a little bit of a struggle sometimes racing Daz. I mean, Mick might say, what a load of shit, but... I always felt it was just a bit harder to beat Dazza because he didn't hate him, whereas he was able to hate everyone else for the time that you're racing. It's like it's almost a manufactured hate. Although some of them I think still carry it, but So some of those races were difficult when Dazza was doing well, and we struggled. We actually were behind him for a championship for a little while, and then I think.
Maybe 95. He had a good year in 95, didn't he?
But then I think he had a big crash, didn't he? Like in Assen, maybe, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I think, anyway, so.
So the bikes in that 5-year window, how much do they change? How much do they evolve in that time frame? Or was it a case of you guys have fundamentally got something that's good and let's just finesse, let's keep a good thing, don't go too far?
It really didn't change a hell of a lot, like it was really similar from the beginning to the end, but it's so incremental that you forget. So when you go to a museum, sometimes now you see the first one and the last one, you go, oh shit, I remember that, it didn't change. But because it happens incrementally, like 1 week to the next, we might change a little thing, and by the end of the season, and it still happens exactly now, like you start the season with bike, X, and by the end it's a different bike because... And people always say, oh, what about the 2000 bike and the 2001 and the 2000, because everyone talks in years like cars, like they've bought a new car, but it's not like that in racing. But people talk about it like that, but it's not the truth. I mean, the truth is you start with a bike, pre-season testing, by the end of the season, it's not the same bike you started with. Whereas the car you bought off the showroom is the same car. So people say, so in 1998 Mazda, but it's not like that in racing. So people always talk about it, but it's not the same. You can have 3 bikes before the end of the season.
You get along the way in the job that you're doing to witness some flashpoints for the riders that you work with, okay? Some of them happened, which we'll get to, outside. So there was maybe, Valentino and Casey at Laguna Seca, for example. What about when it's inside the Repsol garage and you're at, I would imagine, if my memory serves you, you're at Eastern Creek. Yeah. Mick has the coming together with Alex, wasn't it, at turn 9. Man, how was that day and the fallout from all of that, and how you're in effectively the same garage, but how was that day? I remember that. That was pretty. It was a good race until it was a bad race, from a team's point of view. We had to work first and second, I think, probably, or maybe second and third. I think it was first and second we're going for. And I was doing the radios back then. You do the radios out on the circuit, so you do the split time. So I would say, Alex or Mick is in front by X amount of seconds. Yep. On the radio, at the corner, they crashed, right? So I'm at this corner and JB's on the pit wall, and I would say to JB on the radio, plus 0.5, Alex, plus 0.5, blah, blah, something like that. And JB would, and I remember going, JB, they've crashed, and so
they got close, and they were. Yeah, I think Mick ran him wide, I think, at turn 1 and turn 2, and then I maybe put the slipper into him a little bit down there, and then they were just at each other. And then Alex, he came in that corner, you sort of go around the hill at Eastern Creek, and then it was a right-hand turn, right. I'm standing right there.
Yep.
And I'm watching it, and Alex is just like, he's in his mind, I guess he's going, I'm making this pass or I'm not making it, you know. And anyway, that noise, the noise you hear when you're it's horrible, but you never forget the noise. It's just this car crash type of noise, you know. But anyway, there they go, and they're having a bit of a go at each other in the gravel there or the dirt. I think they both pick it up and off they go, and I'm just on the radio to JB, oh mate, they've crashed. And JB just like, he probably would have just put the headphones down and walked in the garage, you know. So
okay.
This is JB.
Yeah.
And then afterwards in the garage, it was going off. There was a couple of mechanics like, hey, you know, yelling at each other. And I don't know if that was the weekend Schwansea crashed too down the main straight. That was a big crash. But anyway, it was going on. And then there was a bit of TV stuff where Alex is like having a go at Mick and Mick's having a go at him. It's just racing, you know, really. You kind of, when those sorts of things happen, you kind of want to back your rider up, whether he's right or wrong. And in this case, I think he was in the right. You know? But just because, you know, you want to show him that you're on his side. That's what you want to do all the time, mechanically and you know, with physical sort of gestures and
like
stuff.
that.
You want to be on their side so they know you're on their side. For lots of reasons, you know, but that's just racing. But yeah, there was a bit of no fisticuffs, but just a bit of
tension.
A bit of tension.
You can find that on the MotoGP website, or probably even on YouTube. We're talking about Alex Screville and Mick Doohan, famous moment at Eastern Creek, weren't we? So
yeah.
So 5 straight, and then Mick has a crash in Spain that is life-changing, career-changing. When that happened, did you think that it was severe straight away? What did you think?
Yeah, I was really worried. I mean, I remember standing in the garage and I remember talking to him just before he went out, you know, because it was damp, and I remember saying something like, I think we said, the weather's going to be fine tomorrow, you know, you don't even have to go out, you know, and I don't know. And he decided to go out, and he went round, and on the TV he'd made a similar mistake the lap before. Like, I think it was only maybe, like, I could be wrong, it's a long time ago, and maybe when someone watches the replay they'll go, you're wrong. But this is how I remember it. Basically, he went out to do a qualifying sort of lap. You go down the main straight, up the hill, round, down, and then you can see the corner on the signage. You can't see the signage, but you see all the tyres. It's opposite the pits, right, the corner. And on TV, he just kind of hits the white line, and like the lap before, and you go, mate, just, you know, don't do that. You know, you go, it's going to be in all sorts of trouble. Next lap, he does it and has a crash, you know. But at the time, I remember JB was on the wall, like with the stopwatch, and at the time that he should be about that point in the track, I think he said he just saw like a muffler or something come over the wall.
Sugar.
But in the end, it sounds like at the same time a guy on a scooter crashes on. I
think it was a photographer.
Yeah. Like, and maybe part of what JB saw was that, you know. But anyway, Mick's had like he's had a bad crash.
I think Mick recalls seeing that guy crash mid-air as he'd been flung off the bike.
Oh, really?
It's something like that. I may not have it correct. But
so it's all happening right almost opposite the pits, and Mick's pretty beat up, and that was the last race in anger sort of he did, you know. And I remember sitting outside, sitting on the concrete step of the medical centre, just sitting there, just wondering what had happened, because we didn't know how bad it was, you know. You think of the very worst things, and but then, you know, it wasn't life-threatening, but they were bad injuries, you know. So he also had like injuries on the upper part of his body from the screws they had these. All the signage was screwed onto the tyre walls, or with these big long screws with washers on them. And I remember looking at the leathers, and later on I think Mick had like come holes in his back, like I think it was his back where the screws had gone right in, like big long screws, you know, like kind of blunt stab wounds, you know, like through the leather and everything from these screws that were holding the signage up. apart from the leg and the other bits of bark, and his helmet was pretty barked up and everything. And I remember Jono, his manager, saying, look, I want you to go up there and take photos of the corner, because he was in Australia, and this was potentially for insurance, type of thing, So I remember had to go up there and had to take pictures of the paint strip. I took samples for him and like scraped up some paint and all this stuff in preparation for anything
that might happen.
And I remember looking at the bitumen too. There's big scratches in the bitumen where I think the fork legs had the top of the fork legs, the handlebar part, had dug into the ground as it left the track, So anyway, there was a bit of a, and he didn't ride there again. So
did you go through then? I mean, obviously, he has to make a big career call.
Yeah.
In your mind, were you thinking, because of some of these one-year arrangements and things, are you thinking I might have to come back to Australia, or was the opportunity to, eventually to go and work with Valentino, was that immediately a plan B? What unfolded there?
Until everyone really knew what was going on, it was a while, and I think Dickie went to America with him.
Dickie Smart.
Yeah,
yep,
so
yep.
he's got on the plane and they went to America to see the doctors that they trusted over there. And then Honda said, okay, so I think they basically said, JB and Dick, you can stay home for the rest of the year. And me and who else was working? Me, I don't know about Bud. I forget what Bud did. I think he might have worked home. I can't remember now. God, bloody hopeless. Anyway, I know what I did. They asked me to work for Sete Gibernau.
Yep.
So Sete Gibernau was riding a twin-cylinder Honda, the lightweight version of the sort of, it was a really nice bike, but the V4 was still beating them in most tracks. So they gave him effectively mixed bikes and said, we want you to show the guys, help them on the bike because you know the bike, and just work there. So I did that all up until maybe at the very last race. They said, you can go home now. You don't need to stay here for the last race, wherever that was. Maybe they're saving money on the ticket too.
Okay.
I forget where. But anyway, Sete did quite well. Used to crash in warm-up though. It's a bit, man.
So does that people will be interested in race day or race weekend things. When that happens, all the groundwork's done, quality's done, you're in race bike mode, warm-up crash.
Yeah.
How crazy does the day become when that happens?
It sucks. It sucks when they crash in warm-up. Like, that's the worst one to crash in, because especially in recent times, because if it rains, you need two bikes, right? So you can't just go, okay, we'll have bike B and that's it. Now you can have two bikes in a race, so you've got to have them both ready. So it's always just a massive stress, getting it ready. But every side of the garage pitches in, so everyone, when shit hits the fan, just everyone. And that's one of the things I've loved about my job, probably without knowing I loved it. When something goes wrong and you fix it, that's probably the best feeling. Like you never want anything to go wrong, but as a mechanic and a team,
when you pull it off and you get it.
When it goes wrong and you all get it right, you get it together, that's like when you push the guy off down the garage, down pit lane, and you've still got it happens, you'll have an 8mm spanner in your mouth or a ruler, and the last thing you did was just adjust the lever, and like he's on the bike, you're still working, and then you push him off, but everyone's involved. It's one of the things that people never really get to see, and if they saw it, they would. It's like an adrenaline rush from mechanics. Like to watch,
got away with that, got it done, got it.
Yeah, but to watch it happen, like if you had a camera in the garage and watch 6 or 8 people, and people were just standing around, just waiting for something to do, just watching it happen. It's unbelievable. Like 6 good mechanics working on a bike, or 8 mechanics never touching each other, never like running into each other, passing spanners because you can see that guy's about to do the job, that you know what he's going to do, and you've got that spanner in your hand. You go, well, here you go.
Yep.
Without talking. Like,
keep it moving. Keep it.
It's honestly you see sometimes in really good restaurants the way people move in a restaurant. It's like that, but it's just out of control, and the pressure. And then you have idiots come and say, we've only got this much time left. You just go, mate. And everyone just goes, shake. All the mechanics shake their head at one of the sort of pen pusher type people who just go, mate, as if we didn't know.
Leave us to it.
Yeah, or like, make sure you do this, and you just go, mate, And so as the time counts down in your mind, everyone's got the same clock in your mind counting down. You just start cutting corners. You just go, okay, this will survive. This will make do. This will get through the race. So, so you just go, I'm not doing that now. No time for that,
Yeah.
So you can fix stuff properly, as in pull it apart, clean it, measure it, or you can get it out to try and win the race. So you can go, look straight to me, just bend it round, like stuff like that. And you just, I think that'll be fine. Japanese mechanics in general aren't that good at that, which I think is one of the reasons maybe we've had our jobs, because they have doubt, and they like to
perfection and
it's like the whole life has been like that. So like they'll look at something and they'll have to agree as a group that it's good enough. Like we'll say, what do you reckon? And one of us will say, should we write, mate? Honestly, it's like sometimes it's like that, and we'll just agree with him. If he says it's going to be good enough, it'll be good enough. So sometimes we've gone to races like, they're the things that I'm getting excited now, because that's kind of the best part of the job, but the worst part. So I'm talking duct tape and elastic and cable ties and tyre wire and just shit that shouldn't be on, man. And it wins a race. That's the best. If it actually wins, finishing is good because you did a good job.
That's the end of part 1 of my podcast with longtime MotoGP mechanic Alex Briggs. Now, I always promised that Rusty's Garage wouldn't be just about riders and drivers. You can also find former F1 engineer, for example, Sam Michael, in our library. And if you're enjoying Alex, make sure you give former chief mechanic Jeremy Burgess, his good friend, a listen as well. Now, we're not done with Alex just yet. Part 2 has his fascinating take on how the riders get in the zone, the different ways they celebrate, why the Ducati chapter didn't work out for Valentino, plus some under the cover of darkness negotiations they had to make when the rider changed teams, and the advent of his social media alter ego, the Wrench Racer. It's all there, good to go in our library right now. All you have to do is kickstart it.
Listener.